Welcome to Deals and Disputes with the West Webb Law Group.
Welcome to today's episode of Deals and Disputes with West Webb Allbritton Gentry, where we explore some of the most pressing legal challenges of our time. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and I'm here with Asher Gregg, associate at West Webb Allbritton Gentry. Asher, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is a topic I'm excited to talk about. I'm a big sports guy, big college sports guy, and today we're going to talk about navigating the NIL for Texas athletes and institutions. So for anybody who's new to this, let's kick it off with the basics. What does NIL actually mean, and how did the law change so quickly in the last few years?
Yeah, so NIL stands for name, image, and likeness, and it really refers to student athletes able to market themselves. Name is pretty self-explanatory. It's usually your legal name or a nickname, pretty much the name people know you by. Image is more your identifiable characteristics, whereas likeness could be more graphic representation. So all those together are kind of how student athletes market themselves. It's how they're recognized in the public. For the longest time, colleges and the NCAA prohibited student athletes from benefiting financially from their name, image, and likeness. That all came to a head in 2021 when the U.S. Supreme Court issued its Alston decision allowing student athletes to benefit from their NIL. Ever since then, states have been adopting their laws constantly to try and keep up with that landscape.
I am someone who grew up on the college football video games. I loved them very much. I was so sad when they went away, but this was a big part of that, was the fact that they were like, wait a minute. They didn't use their names in it, but they used their number and their likeness, and you could tell it was them and all that stuff. So, what else kind of spearheaded this?
I think for a long time, college football was relatively stagnant. You would see players come in and out, they go to the NFL, but then they kind of fade out to the background. Now you're seeing more student athletes around a lot. They're playing their 4, sometimes 5 years in university athletics, and then they get to the pro leagues, and they're there for a long time. They're in commercials, and student athletes were really having a hard time navigating, transitioning from amateur to professional sports, and they just kept wanting to be recognized, and they weren't allowed to until now.
So overall, in Texas specifically, what are student athletes allowed to do with their name, image, and likeness, and where are the lines they can't cross?
Yeah, so student athletes generally have a very wide or broad set of options for them when it comes to NIL. They can work with local businesses. Say you have a mom and pop diner and they want to sponsor a local university student. They can deal directly with that student, and the student can benefit financially. Maybe they get a free meal. It really just depends on the transaction, but they are allowed to have that contract. Say you have a booster club for a university. They are allowed to contact with student athletes directly. Student athletes generally have a lot of leeway in terms of subject matter. It doesn't have to be educational or financial, but there are certain restricted categories such as illegal gambling, alcohol. There's a large list of categories that are off place for student athletes to partake in.
Yeah, I see insurance commercials, I see Gatorade commercials, all the stuff you often see on during a sporting event, even from pro athletes. But okay, so that makes sense. So no alcohol, no gambling, I'm sure tobacco stuff, not that they advertise anymore, but anything related to that kind of stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any common mistakes that you've been seeing in NIL deals right now from either the athletes or the sponsors?
Yeah, so one major requirement is that all NIL transactions have to be disclosed to the university. Universities don't necessarily have a lot of discretion in denying it as long as it complies with state law, the university's internal policy. Sometimes athletic departments have certain NIL requirements. And as long as it meets that state law, university policies, and it doesn't fall into one of those protected or prohibited categories, then the transaction's okay. But each transaction must be disclosed to the university for compliance. And a lot of student athletes are just forgetting to. Maybe they're dealing with a local business. University's not necessarily involved in the NIL deal, but each deal has to be disclosed to the university.
Okay. And can the university support the athletes without getting into legal trouble or violating any NCAA rules?
At the moment, they are not allowed to, but House Bill 126, which is on the governor's desk right now, it passed the Texas legislature with overwhelming support. If he signs it, it will allow universities to contract directly with student athletes even before they are enrolled in the university. They can work to compensate the student athlete, kind of entice them into attending the university and playing for their sports.
And that is certainly something that there's a lot of people who don't like, right? They don't like the idea that it's becoming a free agency or a way for players to, or for colleges to actively pursue with money athletes. I mean, certain coaches and ex-coaches like Nick Saban have been very much against it. Do you feel like that what Bill 126, will that change the NIL game if it's passed?
Absolutely. Texas is known for football, especially college football, and top universities were lobbying very heavily to allow them to directly contract with student athletes. You wouldn't want a school from California to be able to contract with student athletes because all the student athletes across the country are going to flood to California. Texas wants to be a leader, and that's what that bill does.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Has it been receiving pushback? It sounds like it already passed. So is it pretty likely it's going to be signed?
The House passed with overwhelming support weeks ago.
Okay.
The Senate took a lot more time and more issue. There was a ton of pushback, especially when it comes to whether student athletes considered an amateur or professional, whether it'll have an effect on unions and employment contracts, things like that. Senate really pushed back on that. Lobbying really played a heavy part. College athletic directors contacted many of their senators, sports team, even like professional sports teams. They contacted the Texas Senate, and it eventually passed a few days ago.
Okay. So it does seem to have a lot of support from universities, from even NFL teams or pro teams.
Yeah, money talks. And so all these
Sure.
teams really want to be able to have the option to have the student athletes, and they're willing to pay.
Where is the NIL legal landscape still murky? What questions haven't fully been answered yet?
Just last week, a lot of senators were debating that on the Senate floor. One place where it's still murky, where even if House Bill 126 passes, is the effect of contracts with the university directly on sovereign immunity. Texas has a principle called sovereign immunity where you generally can't sue the state unless they allow you to, which they never do. So if, let's say, a public university contracts with a student athlete for, let's just say, $1 million for them to come and play, and the student athlete comes, they play a couple games, and the university realizes, you stink, you're not good at the sport, we thought you were much better, and they cancel the contract. They don't allow the student athlete to play. The remedies for the student athlete are relatively slim at this moment, and the legislature did not clarify that. Unfortunately, the Texas legislature only meets every 2 years, and so it's probably going to be up to the courts to resolve that issue.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So basically they could just get out of the universities could just get out of the contract whenever they want.
That's the concern for sure. Student athletes wouldn't really have remedies where, the unequal bargaining power, the universities tend to have a lot of money, and they can shuffle around their funds based on student athletes' performance. Unfortunately, the law is not clear and doesn't provide a lot of protections to student athletes at the moment. We'll see if a special session is called to kind of resolve those issues. I doubt it, but it'll most likely be up to the courts to figure out the equities in that.
Obviously, things like this kind of hurt smaller schools. The schools that aren't going to have the rep that a Texas has, a Texas A&M has, an Alabama, USC, whatever. You can name all the big guys. Has there been any thought? Has there been any concerns or discussions about how to protect some of those smaller universities from becoming just obsolete from a sports perspective?
Yeah, a lot of the pushback on the law is really coming from small junior colleges or just small universities.
Sure.
Across the country, too. A lot of states are racing to be the best and have the best options for student athletes in their NIL laws. But like you said, the smaller universities are the ones that are really struggling. Of course, University of Texas, Texas A&M, they got wealthy pockets, lots of boosters, sponsors, alumni that can foot the bill for a lot of these student athletes to come. They want to have a really good football team, baseball team, basketball, whatever. So these smaller schools that maybe not have those deep pockets or wealthy alumni are certainly struggling. There's not been a lot of options for them at this point. The law does not necessarily help them either. Unfortunately, these smaller schools are going to have to figure out how to navigate NIL differently than these larger schools. And that could look different depending on the university, it may be more perks at the university as opposed to hard cash. A lot of smaller universities don't have hard cash to just throw around to get players, but they can offer other incentives.
Is there any sort of talk about a, for lack of a better term, salary cap as far as how much a university can spend? Is that part of 126?
It's not part of 126, but other states are really grappling with that. There is a current settlement, NCAA versus House, going on right now that is kind of pushing a lot of these NIL laws. We'll just have to wait and see whether caps will come, and they likely will.
When you talk to any schools or athletes or local businesses wanting to like understand the NIL and make sure they get it right, what kind of legal advice do you typically give?
Yeah, and a lot of it depends on the particular transaction that they're looking for. There's a number of third-party platforms that offer NIL services. Say you want easy access to a student athlete. There's portals where you can contact the athlete directly. The third-party platform can draft the contract for you, and it's a quick and done deal. Unfortunately, these third-party platforms take a hefty percentage of whatever monetary transaction goes on. Sometimes they draft the contract, sometimes they don't. Businesses or sponsors don't have a ton of control over the NIL deal. If you get a law firm to help you navigate, negotiate, and even draft the contract, that could be a lot more long-term relationship. And it doesn't have to be monetary. There's a local business in town that wants student athletes to come promote their social media for their brand, and they offer complimentary meals or merchandise, things like that. It doesn't all have to be monetary, but Texas NIL law can benefit the university, the student athlete, and the business.
I know that, obviously football is the biggest collegiate sport, followed probably by basketball. But with football, I know that with the amount of money a lot of programs make, they're able to fund the smaller sports. That's one of the good things. What as people have always talked about. Okay, say what you will about football, but it's keeping the lacrosse team going. It's keeping the swim team going, whatever, it's helping to fund that stuff. Do you think that's going to get harder now that money is going to have to go to the players?
I think it could be easier, actually. Certain universities are giving NIL caps or NIL budgets to these different departments to go and get those players. Those players, let's just take football, for example. Say the university is able to entice players to come. They have a good season, ticket sales are up, merchandise is up. Those funds can then be trickled down to other smaller sports that may not have that ticket revenue that football, basketball, baseball has.
Okay, so you could actually see it improving the amount of money that's able to trickle down to those smaller sports.
Right. It really just depends on the school, the program. Maybe they invest a lot of money and the return on investment wasn't that high. It all will depend on the sport, the team, and ultimately its performance.
Obviously, this is still very new and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people who, like I talked about before, there's a lot of people who are against it, a lot of people who are very, very for it. Do you have any sense of how it's going to evolve in the next few years, 3 to 5 years?
I think states are going to rush to change their laws. Say House Bill 126 passes, other states are going to try and follow suit and maybe one up Texas. Then the next time the legislature comes, they're going to try and one up these other states. They're really going to keep changing the law to make it more enticing for student athletes to come. Other states don't have those laws. Essentially, it's going to be an arms race to have the best student athletes to come. The issue is not all states will agree. States are obviously going to differ on their laws, and so student athletes are generally going to have their pick on which state to go to, and ultimately the universities.
Yeah, they'll be able to say, okay, I can make more money in Texas than I can in Florida or vice versa or whatever it is, and they'll have the ability to do either of those. Do you feel like do you feel like it's going to take away from, I don't know, what some people like about the sport, if you're willing to weigh in on that?
Good old days as everyone just goes to university and plays sports if they want. That's kind of the theory that everyone's been about, is you're a student first and athlete second.
Sure.
All that has been changing with NIL because now you are a student athlete. And now that you can make money off of your NIL, it's kind of changing your status. It's almost like becoming a collegiate athlete is your full-time job. People can make money. They can pay through school. I've even seen student athletes pay off their parents' mortgage. I mean, they're providing not only for themselves, but their families with this kind of money. And so it's really changing the amateur aspect of collegiate sports into more semi-professional. kind of like a minor league baseball kind of situation. It'll be different in the coming weeks, depending on if Governor Abbott signs HB 126 and other state laws are active as well. The interesting part will be some states have tax laws where you have to pay income tax. California, for example, Texas, Florida, other states offer different taxing. And so it's not just the amount of money, but it's also going to be the effect of tax laws on that compensation the student athlete earns.
Yeah, and you know, for anyone who's been a college sports fan, the idea of them being amateur has been kind of a joke for a long time. I mean, let's be honest. There's so much money being made in this sport. It should be going to the players as well for how much they're bringing in. So I don't think anybody disputes the fact that they're owed something. They just, like, I think some people just worry about the sport itself getting changed too much because of all the money involved.
Right. And when NIL first started, universities were kind of able to offer housing. Like, we'll waive your housing, we'll pay for your food, we'll even pay for your transportation. Now it's more hard cash going to the student athletes, which is really changing the dynamic. It's more of an employer-employee situation where they can part at will, as opposed to an athlete coming to school, getting an education, and playing sports on the side.
Mm-hmm. Is it affecting scholarships or the education of the athletes at all?
Well, interestingly enough, universities must provide financial literacy and just general life courses to student athletes. I believe the requirement is 5 hours. So the university is not only providing a substantive education, but also financial literacy, which can be helpful to high school students that are entering their freshman year who may not know what to do with $1 million dropped on their plate to come to school. And so I think that is something that's very important and not all states require.
Asher, I'm in my 40s and I wouldn't know what to do if $1 million fell on my lap. My goodness. Yeah, I can't even imagine that. It's definitely interesting. All right. Well, thank you very much, Asher, for laying down the law on that and giving us some insight on what this all means. And thank you for tuning in to Deals and Disputes with West Webb Allbritton Gentry. To connect with Asher and the entire team, visit westwebblaw.com, and that's web with 2 B's. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Asher, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.